Looking at the back of the box of Dungeon Alliance here, this is a game by Andrew Parks, and it is described as a deck building, dungeon crawling, miniatures adventure game that allows players to send 1 to 4 different teams of adventurers into perilous dungeons in search of experience and treasure. And I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here and say that in a lot of ways, though, you are definitely crawling through a dungeon, and we'll take a look at the actual game setup in a minute. To me, it's not really a dungeon crawler, at least in the sense of dungeon crawling, exploration, not knowing what's around the corner. It is not that for me. The game mechanics don't actually provide that, and I will explain what I mean by that when I explain how the game works. To me, it is more of a card game, a hand management game, a puzzle type of game than it is one of exploration where, as I said, you don't know what's coming around the corner, because in this game, indeed, you do, and making the choice of what you will be facing is a big part of the strategy of the game. It comes with, there's a list of components here, and this is a review copy of the game that I received from the designer, which came with the base game as well as an expansion that added 4 more heroes. But just in the base game itself, you get 17 hero miniatures, so you get 17 heroes that you can play, and they all come with different cards and abilities, and that is just a very, very rich tableau of choices to start with for the heroes. And you get all sorts of other things in terms of dungeon tiles and a variety of deck cards and upgrade cards and encounter cards and the capacity to play solo or co-op, and all of that comes with the base game. It really is an amazing, you get 200 miscellaneous tokens and wound tokens, an amazing richness of material for the game. And we'll take a look now at a game in progress, a game that's kind of a badly ending game, and we'll take a look at some of what that stuff actually is. Here we see my adventurers, one of whom is quote-unquote resting now. We all know what that means. Spread out in the dungeon like you're never supposed to do, and I did it anyway, and it's not good, because we can see here, even without knowing what these tokens mean, you can see a lot of these tokens here, these green poison tokens, not good, red wound tokens, very bad situation overall. In this game, you are playing a group of 4 adventurers, and I'm going to be talking about the solo play here only, but you're playing a group of 4 adventurers, and they are working as a team. They are working as a dungeon alliance together with a single card hand that you are going to be given for each turn, and it's going to range from 6 to 8 cards depending on how much experience you have. And it is a deck builder, although I will say that the deck building mechanic, while there, is I would say minimized in a good way for me. I really, really do not like deck builders for a variety of reasons, and you don't really feel that those negative constraints here, which is what some of I dislike in a traditional deck builder like Dominion, where it just feels like you're going back to buy the same cards over and over again. And here you can see one of the card offers up here. We'll get to that in a minute. It does not feel like you are constrained, because there are just so many different cards to purchase, and the way in which you level up with using experience points to buy these cards is really integrated into the gameplay and not just like pasted on. So, but be that as it may, your cards are going to have this restriction of who can use them based on certain iconography that is on the cards. These are going to be race icons and class icons that must be present in order for the cards to be used by individual people. So this adds to the strategy, of course, in the game in terms of what cards you have in your hand. Now, some of them, such as this one with the gold circle here, may be used by anybody. But when you're looking at your just move that little trap there. When you're looking at your hand and you're looking at your characters to determine who you're going to activate first in a round, Each round has 4 activations, so one of your people will activate, then the monsters will activate, then the next person, cycling through to be 1 round. The game itself comprises of 4 rounds. So depending on your cards and depending on where there are active monsters or where there are exhausted monsters or where there are no monsters, you're going to have to make choices about what to do and who to activate. And all of that constraint leads to a card game type puzzle situation, a little bit more than a dungeon exploration and dungeon crawl. And that is further emphasized by a mechanic in the game whereby exploring into an unknown space is not simply a matter of turning over a tile. You are given basically a tile offer of 2 tiles. So here we could look and see every time that we have the opportunity to go to a new area, we are having a chance to look at 2 tiles, and they are already revealed, and we can see based on the existing icons on the tile what potential monsters they may be. We can look at the monster cards and the monster tokens. I don't have mine out the way it is described in terms of the setup because I just don't have the space to do it. It's already taking up a ton of space here on my desk. But the traditional setup has you having all the monster tokens on top of the monster cards to have them out in a display, so you have even more of the explicit sense of direction that you want to look and see, well, if I quote unquote explore this tile, these are the monsters I'm going to face, and I can look and see, you know, what their special abilities are. Now, this particular Death Fairy is not, I don't think, represented here, but you get the example. So you can see everything and make your decisions. And in this case, you are going to be choosing between one of these 2 tiles to place, depending on what you want to face. And you will know when making that choice what cards you have in your hand, who can use those cards, and of course, who in your party has already been activated and who is eligible to be activated. So this is extremely different to me than what I think of as a traditional dungeon crawl, where you have, first of all, the unknown in terms of where you're going, what you will be facing. I mean, at a certain point, it's going to be revealed, but here you're given a choice, and it is a very gamey kind of situation where you are explicitly given this choice as to what to put and how to place it. So that's the first thing that, to me, makes it a little bit less like a dungeon crawl. Secondly, while the monsters do move, their placement is static. So when they appear, you know where they're going to be. There's no wandering monsters, for example, coming around here. And there is no sort of random popping up of an unknown treasure that you could then explore and find, or trying to determine whether there is a treasure in the room. There are rules to discover quote-unquote hidden or secret doors to allow a different type of passage through, because you're working here on a 3x3 grid, and of course everything is not going to always match up. So there is a mechanism to say, okay, well, this is actually going to be a secret door and I can go through it that way. But that aside, it is a very pre-planned kind of situation in terms of movement and decision making. This isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's quite enjoyable, and it reminds me a little bit of the card play, for example, in Mage Knight. It is not as heavy a game as that. It even reminds me a teeny bit of Mistfall, perhaps. Again, definitely different mechanics and much lighter, but this concept of having constraints on the cards, having abilities, matching the abilities to the situation and the enemies, which are known, all of which is known to you, and some of which you can actually even control. This is what the game is about, and ultimately this is where the game shines. To me, is that traditional dungeon crawl? No, it's not. It isn't. And it certainly is a dungeon theme, and I don't know what else you would call it, but that is an important distinction, I think, and it makes this game different from other dungeon crawls that I have played. The AI in the game is controlled by this deck of cards, and I'll take a look with you at how this works. The card iconography is explained, it looks a little intimidating, but it's not so bad, and it's explained pretty clearly in the book. There are different parts to the card, and you are meant to enact the top part and then one of the two middle parts, and if you can't do either of those, then you move to the bottom, and as you move down the card, it gets kind of worse as to what happens. The top part of the card in this case is referring to the card offer, the reward card offer, and it is instructing you in this case to discard the first card in the offer and to remove from the game the fourth card. Removing from the game is different than discarding because it is possible to get cards back from the discard, but once it's removed from the game, it's just gone. So this causes you to cycle through those offer cards, which we'll look at in a bit, pretty quickly. Often in the co-op card, there is going to be something to do with that as the top part of the card. Not always, but often. In this particular case, the next thing you must do, and then, is to activate the monster with the highest experience point value. So, for example, we'll take a look here at, I just pulled this guy out. This is a manticore. He's got an experience point value of 4 when you kill him, so that's pretty high, actually. You're meant to activate the one with the highest, who will get +1 to his melee or ranged attack, and he must attack, in this case, a human or a card with this icon. If that can't happen for whatever reason of the placement, you are then meant to activate another monster who gets +2 and can attack anyone. If still neither of those two things can happen, then what you do is you must take an exhausted monster. So once a monster activates, it turns to its exhausted side, and in this case you would then be unexhausting that monster, giving it a +3, and having it attack anyone. So one of these three things on this, or three things on this card is going to end up happening, and you have to do this. Now, per the regular rules of the game, you turn over this card and make it visible to yourself at the beginning of your turn. So not only are you getting to choose and make a decision about what to place in terms of your exploration, for example, but you are also getting to see what monsters are going to be activated based on what is already there. And this is true whether you're exploring that turn or not. To me, this felt just a little bit too much pre-planned, and instead of doing it that way, I followed what they call the nightmare solo and co-op play rules. And, you know, they say here in the rule book, we can just see right up here, players looking for an even greater challenge during solo and co-op play can play Nightmare Mode, which forces you to delay the flipping of the top card of the deck until the start of the monster activation. This means that the players will have no idea what will happen during the monster activation until they are done activating their heroes. It says this can lead to more random game, blah, blah, blah. Indeed. I mean, again, for me, this is, as a dungeon crawl, it's meant to have a certain degree of randomness, it's meant to have a certain degree of surprise, and that aspect of it I felt necessary to use. So I did not turn these over at the beginning of my turn. I just turned them over when it was the monster's turn because, as I said, it just became a little bit too much of trying to focus not only on which cards to use for my hero, but indeed moving forward and saying, well, if I do this, then this is going to happen with that, and blah, blah, blah. And it's very easy to just kind of get so caught up in those types of decisions that it simply became a, not so much a numbers game, but just a real card management game. And while I like that, it can take away a little bit from the theme. Now, in terms of the characters, you are given a huge stack of 17 characters in the base game, and they are very nicely numbered here, so it makes it extremely easy to sort these cards. There's icons and pictures as well, but I really did appreciate this. I wish more games would do this. Just make it simple. And I also got, as I mentioned, this expansion, which added up to 21 characters. But even in the base game, this is just a ton of variety, and each character card, we'll just take a look at a couple of them. Each character comes with 3 basic cards. Now, he has, so this is our, let's see, let's look at here's our character itself. Here's the character, and we get 2 cards with them, the younger picture and the older picture. The stats are the same, and I didn't really find a reference to this in the book as to what this, whether it matters which you play with or what you choose. But in any event, the characters have an attack value. In this case, he does a melee attack. There are some characters that do ranged attack, and it's pictured with, the familiar bow and arrow, as you would imagine. This is his defensive value. In this case, he has a sort of armor/helmet type of defense. Some of them have a little picture of somebody dodging. They have like a dodge defense, but this dwarf's not going to do any dodging. He's going to use some armor to protect him. This running icon means his movement value, and this is his total health. So this is our dwarf priest, and we can just take a look. We'll look at a couple of the different characters to see the differentiation of the cards that he begins with. So these are the cards that he begins with. You're shuffling your hand together, so you're getting a starting hand of 12. You may not draw all of these, but they're in your deck to start with. He has an enhanced spell, which does not require line of sight, because line of sight is active in this game, but using this spell, it doesn't matter. For the rest of this round, you and all allies who activate within 3 spaces of you gain this amount of movement, as well as +1 ranged or melee. And this is great, because when you play this card, it's going to be in effect for the whole round. So if he goes first, say, all of his 3 companions will get the benefits for all of their turn. Now, if he goes last, nobody gets the benefit but him. But this is another way in which the game is so tightly knit in terms of being cooperative among those 4 players to make a determination. If I had this in my hand and nobody had activated, I would seriously consider, should I activate him first? Should I activate him and move him near other people, etc.? He has an action card that allows him to search his deck, place it in his hand, and reshuffle. That's pretty good. Wise counsel. It's bringing in some more information. And he also has a healing card, so he can spend some movement to remove some wound tokens, either from himself or from an adjacent ally. So these are some great starting cards for this this dwarf. What was he? A dwarf priest. But other characters that we'll see, they have very different, they all have very different abilities. So let's see what we have here. Here's an elf wizard. So she's a ranged attack character. She's dodging for her protection, her movement, and her health. And she has an action. She can draw 3 cards, or she can get a card from her discard. So that's her dark recall. She has a Drain Vigor, that's a control spell. She can spend some movement to place her token on an enemy and basically give them a -4 melee for the round. And she also has a Magic Bolt, which is an attack spell unto itself, and it will ignore the defense of the character. So that's pretty self-centered, but pretty powerful spells that she has. Combat in the game is pretty simple, and let's say this dwarf priest was foolhardy enough to try to attack this manticore. Wouldn't happen, but unaided, he just has a 1 melee attack as against a dodge value of 2, so he's not going to be able to inflict any wound. But of course, you're playing cards to aid in your attack and aid in your defense. So if he had cards that could buff up that 1 melee, he could decide to attack, and if he could get through enough wounds, he could kill this manticore. Now, the manticore has a health of 7, so that's pretty unlikely, but it is possible. So it's a very simple type of combat, and it works the same way in reverse. in this case, the Manticore does poison spikes, so whatever wounds he inflicts are going to be poison wounds, which will be represented by these green tokens that you really want to avoid, because every round you get an additional one. So the poison is like slowly taking effect. So that's not great. You can get rid of them, but they will be continuing to advance. He does a 5 ranged attack. So for example, if he was attacking our dwarf priest here, and the dwarf priest had no other cards to help him defend, he would take 2 wounds because he has a defense of 3. And that's pretty much how it goes. There is a 1 die in the game. It is not a d6, although it is 6-sided, and it has the values of 0, 1, and 2, and 3 on it. It has 2 zeros. I think it has 2 1s, a 2 and a 3. There are very few, but some characters that will attack with an addition of the die roll, so you could get potentially up to an additional 3 points of attack. Sometimes you'll just get 0. The die doesn't come in often, but it is there as part of the game. The card offer is a very important part of the game, and as mentioned earlier, take a look at this. This is a zombie, I think. When you successfully kill a creature, you get an experience point based on this value here. So for the zombie, you would get 1 experience point. You use these to purchase cards in the card offer, and the cost of the card is here in the upper right. This is cards coming from the 2nd level of offer, and what's neat is when you use it to buy it, you don't just toss it away, you actually turn it over, because you retain the experience point for later scoring in the game, but you spend it to fill your deck with cards. And I'll just take a look here at a couple of the cards. So this is a maneuver card, for example, and it's going to allow you and all allies who activate near you to gain +2 dodge, as well as a +2, basically a +2 to offense and defense, and also remove a wound token. So that's a pretty strong card. It would, as mentioned, cost 4 experience, and again, it can only be used by characters that have these icons. Here is a pet that you can buy, and this will do some attacks for you, and it explains what the values are that it has. The thing about the card offer that displeased me a little bit was that when the card offer level is tied to the dungeon tile level. So once you move through the first level of dungeon tiles, those are labeled level 1, you then need to replenish the card offer with cards from level 2. And these are more powerful, but they're also more expensive. I found that there are so many level 1 cards, and there's actually a lot of level 2 cards. Well, this is a lot of level 2 cards here as well. I left a lot on the table, as it were. There was a lot of game design I didn't get to see because the cards cycled through so quickly. A combination of moving through the dungeon level quickly, and also the fact that as mentioned earlier, some of these AI cards force you to discard or throw out of the game some of the cards from the offer. So a little bit of that felt like it went wasted. You know, the design went wasted. I guess that's meant to model somehow playing with other players who are buying up or taking cards that you may want, and of course forcing you to save your experience to buy cards that cost more, that give you more value later on. But there was something about that mechanic that didn't feel quite as smooth to me as the rest of the game, but I haven't really been able to pinpoint yet exactly what that is and how I might house rule it to fix it for myself a little bit better. Now, of course, it is a dungeon crawler, even though I said there were certain aspects of it that were not dungeon crawl-ish to me. And what would a dungeon crawler be without quests? There are quests here, and I'm only going to show you one of them because, for me at any rate, I don't like to really ruin the surprise of the game. So I'm not going to scroll through all of the quests, but I will show you one of them, and this is the Rescue Tatiana quest, and it comes with a little Rescue Tatiana token there. The quest value here is down at the bottom, and it tells you what is going on here. The Queen of the Fae is caught in a magical trap, and there she is, ooh, caught. Trigger. So we have to do something to get the quest to begin. In this case, we have to open 3 secret doors to place the queen in the dungeon. And then to resolve it, we must cast 3 spells in her room to free her. And it says place these spells sideways to show that they have no other effect. So what's interesting to me about this quest and some of the other ones, there are some quests that are kind of like boss monster quests. Not kind of like, they're boss monster quests. But what's interesting to me about this and some of the others is that it forces you to bring in some logistics to the situation, because first of all, you need to find these secret doors, and there's a mechanism for doing that, fine. And then you have your dungeon layout, and then you have her placed somewhere. And then you must be collecting and sort of hoarding your spell cards. I showed you, I think, some of the spell cards earlier in this video, to bring them to that room and to take up your hand size with these cards that you basically can't use for anything else except bringing them to the room that she's in order to simulate or to model casting all these spells and freeing her. Well, that's pretty cool, because what it does is it provides an overlying structure to what you're doing. You're not just walking around and going into rooms and killing all the monsters that are in there, but you have to make decisions about where it is you're going to find these secret doors and therefore place her, and how you're going to get back to where she is while you have accumulated and held in your hand 3 spell cards that you can then in effect just discard when you're in the same room with her. And that's how a quest should work. It should be a kind of meta story that is impacting your movement, it's impacting your card play, and in this case, when something impacts your card play, it's also impacting your ability to conduct combat, to conduct healing, etc. The quests really well integrated, very well done. And this leads me into the victory conditions for the game. There are different sets of victory conditions, and one of them does involve quests. It's just a sort of a level of victory. I don't know how quickly I can find it here. Here we go. Win-loss conditions for solo and cooperative play. If all players agree, then the game can be played with a win-loss conditions as opposed to victory point conditions during solo or co-op play. Players must complete these conditions or they lose the game, and then there's 4 different levels. So a novice level, you have to complete 1 of the 3 quests that you pull, adept 2 of the 3, or expert 3 of the 3, and one of them must be a final enemy quest that is a boss monster, and master is completing all 3 quests. And there are different levels of quests, so you are meant to choose a quest at a 3 experience point, a 5, and a 7 for your quest setup. So that is one way of winning the game. The other way of winning the game is straight up victory points, and I don't know where that is here in the rules, but that's less interesting to me. But there are indeed the victory point conditions for winning the game. And to get a sense about how much content there is here and a little bit about these awesome minis, I've got just showing you in the middle. I'm going to pick a new party. I'm not doing the drafting as discussed. You are meant to choose 2 random characters and look at them and assess and choose one and then bring in another one, etc., to do some drafting for yourself. I'm not doing that. I'm just picking a party myself because I want to do it that way. And I have chosen so far this dwarf priest. This is the Belzamen dwarf priest, and I'm going to be playing with a half-orc priest. I'm going to be playing with an elf wizard and a gnome scholar because I want to see if I can get something done without one of the big guns. Now, I mentioned, I believe, that the color-coded bottoms are meant to be placed on the party together. So you're supposed to be playing, say, with 4 green if you're playing co-op, as against another party that has 4 red or 4 blue or whatever, because there are rules there for ascertaining who's putting the wounds on, who gets the victory points, etc. I'm color coding myself because it's a little hard for me to differentiate. Here, as an example, are two different characters, and to me, when I'm playing and I got a lot of this stuff going on, they look a little bit similar, and it is easier for me to color code this way, and then I leave another base on the card so I can easily just glance and see who is where, and that is, not as the rules go, but this is why I do it this way, in part. I mean, these two characters happen to look the most alike. There's a lot of different types of characters, so if you've got a dwarf next to one of your big guys, that you're not going to mistake them, but nevertheless, I do that. And now I need to search out and find my this gnome scholar mini. Oh no, I got him. I need to find, let's see, I need to find her and Lorna and get this all set up. Why did I choose these characters? Well, let's just take a quick look at their starting cards. And of course, I'm realizing now, as I should have before, you get these 2 character cards for the campaign version, which is actually sort of cool. So here he is younger, here he is older, and you could use those various cards for the campaign. Nevertheless, we'll just take a quick look at what various characters start with and why I've put this together. He has some wise counsel, which is allowing him to do a little bit of card manipulation within a turn to bring in a card. He has a healing spell for himself or for somebody near him. And he has another enhanced spell, which is going to help everybody who is around him gain some speed as well as gain some offense. So he's going to be a protector, he's a priest, and that is quite thematic. We have our other priest here. This is Lorna, and she has devoted her life to the dark gods she serves. She calls upon their aid to uplift her allies and confound her enemies. So with her spell, she has an enhanced spell, Celestial Wrath, and she also is going to be helping out people around her and giving some speed. No line of sight needed for that spell. She has a control spell, so what she can do is take a target who is going to be attacking either her or one of her party and minimize their offense. So that's very helpful. It's very protective, this blinding light. And she has a group heal. So these 2 characters are somewhat similar, but I'm going with it because I want to see what I can do with that in terms of bringing in other cards that I may buy. We have this elf wizard, Ipsy, and her youthful appearance belies her love for the dark arts and all the power they bring. So we have a theme here, and her other card is the darkness gradually overtook her, but she did not resist. She basked in her newfound might. And she's got dark recall, so she's going to be bringing in cards from the discard pile that will help flesh out perhaps what they can do. She also has some spells, and this is a very similar one, a control spell to disable enemies. And she has her magic bolt, which is a totally range attack spell that is going to completely take the enemy off guard and ignore any type of dodge defense that they might have. Now we remember there are 2 types of defense, so this is not going to help with every enemy, because if an enemy has the helmet defense, it's not going to affect that, but she could still use the ranged attack. And finally, we have this gnome scholar here, Runyon Zay, and he, having unearthed the Library of Avalon, spent the next 50 years poring over its tomes. When he emerged, he was a force beyond reckoning. So I've got to choose the guy who's the big reader, of course, and he, in his other card, he is feisty, inquisitive, and occasionally temperamental, and proven his worth to his allies on more occasions than even he can count. His cards, he has ancient lore. He can spend a movement point to place his hero token, that is this, 2 to 3 spaces away, and then anyone who is near this monster will ignore that monster's defense. So he can basically set up other people to do some attacking through his action. He has an enhanced spell. This is Revitalize, and in order to play this, he needs to discard a card and then target somebody, but he can get a wound off and get some movement going. And finally, he also has an attack spell. This is a melee attack spell. I should have mentioned this is a ranged attack spell. He's got a static discharge, and this is going to ignore that other type of defense of a character. So these two spells together with different characters are potentially going to be very helpful in dispatching with enemies, depending on where the enemies are and depending on the type of defense that the enemy has. So you can see here now, even though I haven't chosen a warrior, and even though some of my characters are somewhat similar with the healing, we have the beginnings of a strategy that may emerge in terms of how we activate the members of our party, because these two characters have these very important attack cards, and of course they may not be in my hand at the same time. I'm just showing you the cards that are available. These are not necessarily the cards that are going to be drawn up at any given time, but I know it will be coming. So that is a look. It's obviously a bit messy here at the choices that are available to you very much at the beginning of the game. Again, I didn't do the drafting the way the rules are meant to be done, and I'm not against doing that, but I am more interested at this point in trying to play through without any official warrior character and see how far I can get. Couple more points about setup that need to happen. There's a chart here that will tell you what type of XPs you need to put into your pool that is going to determine how you advance to a level. So as I'm playing with one person, I've got 8 experience points that I need to get before I can advance to the second level, and then 12 before I can advance to the third level. And again, the levels have to do with the tiles that you bring out, but also the cards that are in the card offer here to upgrade. We're looking at the level 1 upgrade cards here, and because we are playing with a rather imbalanced party, we can see that some of these cards are going to be completely unavailable to us. So for example, we're not going to be able to use this bestial form at all because we do not have with us any characters in our party that have that particular class. That's the primordial class, and we would never be able to use that. We do, however, have, well, this is useful by anybody, and a bunch of our characters are from the Celestial class, so we could take this awesome weapon, and we also, I think we have the Eldritch, an Eldritch class character somewhere. Yes, we do. So we could take this too. So that's just something to be aware of. We have nobody with stealth. With a couple of dwarfs, you're going to have to bypass these type of cards. Again, it's a further restriction. I've chosen to do that to myself, but if you made a more balanced party, you would have more potential availability here. So you need to set up that offer, and you need to set up your XP, and then the final thing that you need to do is get your dungeon tile pile ready, and it will tell you here in this chart, again, playing with one character, or one player, 4 characters. I need 6 level 1 tiles, 4 and 2, so we have our stack here. We're going to just pull them in randomly and set them up, and pretty much we'll be ready to go. I have set up my characters along the side here. This is really due to space constraints. You're meant to probably have them in front of you, because when you play cards to the table for a character, the cards will continue to take effect for the entire round. I just remember, if I have a card that is played by, say, this guy, that it still impacts him in that round if she's going, and that's not too difficult for me to remember, but you're meant to be playing the cards below the characters. One note here, these are the character tokens, and I really wished that they were just the right size so that I could have clip this onto the back, because that would have made it so much easier for me in terms of keeping track this way, but they're just off size, so it doesn't work that way. So again, this is where I have these things floating around here to signal who is who, and this token unfortunately just can't be given a base because it's just slightly the wrong size. Couple of other points in terms of things to set up. I showed you this Rescue Tatiana quest. I've got 3 quests set up here, and I'm not going to tell you what they are aside from her, but here's another one, and then this one with the multiple cards is one of the boss quests. So when you have a boss quest, you have the main card, which explains what the boss monster is, and then a variety of other cards that will be implemented by this character. So, got the quest set up. Have a starting tile. There is a frame. You saw that earlier in my video. You're playing as solo. You're playing on a 3x3 grid. I like the idea of the frame and it looks cool, but it just doesn't work. It keeps coming apart and it's annoying, so I'm not playing with it. But we know that we are restricted here into a 3x3 grid for our solo play. Here are my characters, and the last thing is we got this draft card here that is going to remind us that as we draft cards from the offer, which is up here, we will be able to increase our discard limit and ultimately increase our hand size, and it comes with the teeniest, tiniest little counter to keep track of it that my cat is just drooling over, so I don't use that. I'm using my handy dandy sword that you may have seen in other of my videos just to keep track of where I am on this chart. So that goes off to the side there, and I'm shuffling up those cards that I have. So I've got the starting deck of 12, which is 3 from each player, and I start with my hand of 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll take a look at what we got. I did shuffle, so hopefully we got a couple cards from everybody, and we did. So you got a balanced hand to start with, and we have some spells, some actions, more spells, more actions, and a healing spell that we're probably not going to be needing right now, hopefully. And we're ready to roll. So the first thing we do, we're on our starting tile. Actually, I think I have it backwards here. Again, I'm playing without the frame. Well, you know what? No, that's right. This will be my imaginary frame here. So 3x3, you are meant to be using the frame that comes with the game, but I don't know how I have these guys set up. Whatever. I just found that too irritating. Kept moving around. What you're doing is you have the offer of the 2 tiles that you can take a look at and pull in and see who you want to fight here. There's there's a goblin here. Obviously, there's some spiders here. There are these challenge cards. Actually, that's good. I don't think I've shown those before. So there are these challenge cards here, or tiles I should say, and they are meant to be placed when you see this icon. These could be good or these could be bad, so it is another thing that happens in the dungeon that you could possibly find, and you're off. You're making a decision. Again, it's open information, so the assessment here, and I'm not going to go through it because the video is already getting long, but the assessment here is how you would be placing these tiles. If you placed it as such, that would be an open door that you could automatically walk through, and you'd have 3 spiders facing this thing, whatever it may be. You could also choose to do a placement that would potentially be a locked door. If you set it up this way, that counts as a locked door, and then you could go through basically a die roll to see whether you were successful in opening the locked door. Why would you give yourself a locked door? Well, we remember, actually that is a secret door we need. That's something slightly different to place the queen in the dungeon. So if we are working for this quest, we want to make sure that we do open some secret doors. And this would be a secret door, for example, here. So we can't do a placement of that right now, but that's something to bear in mind. And, we can look up and see what actually these characters have in terms of are they ranged characters, are they melee, what type of wounds would they do, etc. It's all open information, and these are some of the decisions that you make based on the cards that you have in your hand. All right, I changed my mind a little bit about what I was going to do. I'm not going to come back mid-game and show you something. I'm just going to show you the decisions that I made right now because this gives the best sense of how this game works. I chose to place the tile that had the 3 spiders surrounding this challenge token. Why did I do that? Well, let's take a look at the spider card here. Now, as mentioned, each of the counters has all the values, but you have them nicely placed on the card as well. The spider does a melee attack of 3. It has a dodge value of 2. It can move 4, so it's quick. It only has a health of 1. The wounds that it does, the giant spider inflicts these poison wounds as wound tokens, and it only is worth an experience point value of 1. The poison tokens aren't great because you need to keep, once you place one at the end of a round, you need to place another one if you still have one. So it is coursing through your body and increasing. However, it only has this health of 1, and there are these 3 spiders surrounding this challenge token. My other option for placement here was this tile, and this tile has a goblin on it, and I'll show you the goblin here. The goblin has a ranged attack of 2. He's not mobile at all, but he's quick, and he's got a health of 2. He also only gives you 1 experience point, but he's a wild shot, so when he attacks, you can roll this die. I mentioned there's the die in the game. It doesn't come into play often, but it is going to give you the potential for adding up to 3 on his attack that is already 2. So that's one issue. The real issue, though, for me was this bugbear, because the bugbear, who also only gives you an experience of 1, has a health of 5. He has a melee attack of 3. He has his own defensive capability of 2. He's a bear after all, and he's pretty quick. He also gets this combat die roll, so you could potentially be rolling up to 6 on him. So I really wanted to avoid that early on in the game, so that's why I went with this tile. I also could have placed the tile in a variety of different spots, but I wanted an open door here, and once we walk through it, we will place this door open counter to indicate that, because I really just want to see what's on this challenge thing. I want to get some experience points quickly, and I'm hoping I can dispatch with these 3 spiders without doing too much damage to myself, if any at all, because I need to look here and always be aware of what cards are on offer. And as mentioned, not all of them are going to be available to me because of the restrictions of the card usage. I have my eye on this Warhammer because I have the correct icon to use it with a couple of my characters, and in addition to giving me either just a straight up 3 attack or adding 2 to my own existing attack, it says that for the rest of the turn, each time I play a card that allows me to remove a wound token, I can remove an extra wound token. This may not be so useful right now, but it's going to be useful later on in the game, because as you recall, I do have a couple of cards already in my hand that allow me to remove wound tokens, and I think I even have a card that allows me to remove 2 wound tokens. So this card right now is going to be very valuable to me, even more valuable to me later on, let me put it that way. But it costs 2 experience points. So I have my eye on this card, and as you recall, with the rules for the co-op and solo play, there's going to be an AI card. I'm not going to know what it is right now because of the way I'm playing, but when I flip it over, one of the potential effects could be to get rid of some of these cards, and if I lose some cards that I might want, I'm in trouble. So I chose, all this to say, I chose this tile with spiders that I believe I will be able to deal with. And I sort of didn't give a lot of thought to the placement of my characters here, but I do have this this character here with some ranged weapon that typical range is 2 to 3 away, so I can't actually get to a spider now, but I could move with her, and we're off, and that's what we're going to do. So taking a look at the cards in our hand here, we note that, so here's Lorna. That's Lorna. And she is a half-orc priest, so we're looking for this icon to see if we've drawn in any of her cards, and we actually have just drawn in this control spell of Blinding Light, which tells us to place our hero token on an enemy 2 to 3 spaces away, and that will reduce their attack for the rest of this round. Now, her attack, unfortunately, her total attack is only 2. And this card is not going to do anything to decrease the defense of the spider, which is 2. So Lorna is not on her own without any buffing going to be able to do much to even dispense with one spider. It will diminish the spider's attack, but she's not going to be able to get rid of it because she just doesn't have, it's the beginning of the end. We don't have any other cards. But nevertheless, this is what we're going to do. Lorna is going to, she's got a movement of 4. So she's going to move forward 1, and then she needs to spend 1 movement to open this door. This is an unlocked door, but she needs to spend a movement to open the door. So that's 2 movement points that she's used. She is a ranged attacker, so she needs to stay 2 to 3 away from one of these spiders to attack it, and she can do an attack. It's not going to land any wounds because of the protection that the spider has, but she can play this card and place her token on one of these spiders for future diminishing of its own attack, and that's what she's going to do. So she'll do that, and see, we don't need her card here, and that is going to be her turn, and you are meant to use these tokens when a character is exhausted to turn them over and exhaust it. In this case, it's placed on the dungeon tile because that's an ongoing effect that indicates that she is exhausted there. And at the end of her turn, then what you do is you need to turn over, or again, if you're playing per the rules, this would already be turned over, but we're not, so we're going to now reveal what the AI is going to do. What the AI will do starts with our offer here. We need to completely discard from the game this card, and actually this is lucky for us because we can't use this card anyway. We don't even have this character, so that's like a non-effect. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, we need to discard into our discard pile this teleportation spell. That's too bad actually because this is a nice one, but whatever. So that goes away, and then we refill the offer immediately with 2 new cards, and I'll do that. Let's come back here and see. Then what needs to happen is, sorry about that, everything a little bit messed up here. Then what needs to happen is the monster or enemy with the highest XP, and they're all the same here, they all have 1, is going to get 1 to its ranged or melee attack, and it's going to attack, it's going to be looking to attack a character with this icon, and in that case this is the gnome scholar here. This is our character back here. So then we need to make some decisions. The spiders can move 4, 1, 2, 3. I guess it could do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a little ambiguous because could I choose this spider and have it attack? I mean, I've decreased the attack value of this spider. So is there anything that says to me, I haven't decreased the XP? So the XP on this is still 1. They're all 1. It could be any of these. Why wouldn't I choose the one that's already diminished to attack? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something in the rules that explains this a little bit more. But I would say if I'm in charge of this, that's what would happen. Now, if this did attack with its diminished, it would obviously be a much lesser attack, and in fact I don't even think it would do a wound because I have a dodge value of 2, so that wouldn't do a wound because it would be attack of 1. If this fellow, the unencumbered one, attacked with a melee of 3, I only have a dodge value of 2, so I would get a wound. It's ambiguous to me what is meant to happen here. I will, for right now, I will take the unencumbered spider. I will move this spider into this spot here, and I will enact this attack, and the attack actually comes with a +1 value. So what is happening therefore is we're adding 1 to this melee value of 3, so the spider is attacking with 4. He's attacking this fellow with 4, and I'm dodging 2 of them. And I look to my hand to see if I have any reaction cards that can help prevent some of this, but I do not, because the only card I'm carrying for him is an action card, which wouldn't help me here. So this means that I am going to take 2 wounds, and I indicate that by placing 2 wounds on my character card off to the side, and that was then the AI action for this turn. Now, since I was able to do this, I don't need to go through the rest of the card. That's it. Now, when I'm playing to signal that I have done this, I just leave the card like this so that the next round I'll move this and then turn it over. So we know that this particular round has completed because we've had the action by this character and then the reaction by the monster, and then we're moving forward. And we do that for all the other characters, and once that happens once, that's 1 complete round of play, and the game itself is 4 of these rounds. One point to mention, despite all the great stuff that comes with the game, there isn't a round counter, and you think to yourself, well, it's only 4 rounds, you'll remember it, but so much happens in those 4 rounds, and in each round is like 4 turns. It gets a little confusing, so I wish there was something that came with the game that's a round counter. Obviously, you can use something like you probably have, a D6, to just keep track of what round you're in, but it's too bad that the game didn't come with something, because that's really lacking. The game gets pretty busy pretty quickly, and when you're in 2 or 3 tiles into the dungeon and you've got various enemies that are lurking around, and you have treasures that you're trying to find, or challenges that you're trying to find, some of which may be treasures, some of which may be traps, you have a lot of busyness in your head thinking about the card management and who you're going to activate first and what potential cards are in the card offer that you might want to purchase, and whether you go for enemies that are easier to kill and sort of very slowly buy cards worth 1 value with those, or save up to try to get a slightly more enticing card, say worth 2 or 3, or that costs you 2 or 3 points in the first level. And all of these things make for an interesting and I don't want to say demanding, because it's not a heavyweight game, but there's just a lot of interlocking pieces that are very well designed, and the game mechanisms work together quite well. As I said, the only little hitch in that for me is the card offer, because I felt as if, or still feel as if, I'm leaving or not having access to enough of the level 1 cards, because once you pull in a level 2 dungeon tile, you're instructed to remove all of the level 1 cards, and it makes it harder to get the cards later on, so because they cost more. So I suppose that is a legit. You don't want to be in the 3rd level of the dungeon and having so much XP that you can easily pick up a level 1 card, but I don't know, maybe shuffling 1 and 2 together would have felt a little more balanced, or at least felt like I was given access to more of the design that was there. The monsters are, I would say, the point of the game where the richness of the components is slightly lesser. And what I mean by that is you have so many different characters. You have so many different cards and actions and reactions and spells. But you don't have so many different monsters. You have enough, but if you play the game enough, even 3 or 4 times, pulling out the same dungeon tiles, you are facing the same monsters. It's very different depending on the characters you're playing with, but the monsters themselves don't feel as dynamic as the approaches that you have to dealing with them. And so it's a little imbalanced in that regard, and I would have wanted a little bit more variety in the monsters coming out and a way of dealing with that that gave a little bit more to you to deal with. Again, the replay value, though, seems to me very high because of the combinations of characters that you can get with 17 to choose from and picking 4 each time. That's great, and they are very different and they are thematic, so the scholars and the priests and the warriors play differently, and of course the card offer is going to increase the variability of the deck that you're playing with. So there's a ton there, but it did feel a little bit like, okay, I know, here's another zombie, here's another spider, here's another, I don't know, there's a lot of these goblins, okay, first level, there's going to be a ton of goblins. So that was, the one area where I felt, despite the richness of the material, it was a little bit less so. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. It is definitely feels like you're in a dungeon. I know I said at the beginning, it's not a dungeon crawl, in the regard of the sense of wandering around in the dark, not knowing what's around the next corner, a monster possibly popping up somewhere where you think it's empty. That is not part of this game. But you definitely get the dungeon feel. The artwork is great for that, and the sense of being in a closed space is also very excellent, and I like that. The tiles force you to stay feeling physically together and juggling for position, and not being able to get out of each other's way perhaps as much as you would want to. That's all very effective, and it has implications in terms of line of sight rules and things of that nature. So that really works well. But ultimately, at its heart, I think this is a card game that uses minis and the dungeon theme to allow you to do hand management, card manipulation, building little strings of cards together to have the most effect that you want, and it does that very, very well. And that is something I love in games. It appears in many different types of games. When you marry it to a dungeon theme, it works fantastically well. The deck building aspect of it, as I mentioned also, I'm not a huge fan of deck builders, but it doesn't really have that feel of the constraints of like buying the same card over and over again because you only have one experience point, because the cards that you can get for just one experience point are so different, and they are also restricted as to which character you can use them for, and all of that is wonderful and really is a perfect funnel for bringing cards slowly into a deck, making agonizing decisions about whether you're going to buy a card right now or wait. Maybe I can kill one more enemy and get this other card that's sitting next to it that is slightly better, but I don't know if the solo AI card that's coming is going to force me to discard that. So all of that that's going around in your head is fantastic. So there's a look at Dungeon Alliance. It's a game by Andrew Parks, and for me it was a quite enjoyable play, and one where I spent a ton of time agonizing and trying to figure out if I was doing the right thing, and when the game was over and I lost, I wanted to go back and try again with a different set of characters. And because of what's included in the box, there are many opportunities for doing it. As always, thanks for watching.